To police officers, how are you feeling seeing how the situation was handled in Texas?
Military police here. I am angry beyond words at the tragedy that has taken place. MP training is direct to threat, and even without hearing gunshots we are required to breach the building and begin securing it, so if people are shot inside we can create a clear corridor for casualties to be collected and treated. These cowardly pieces of poo should turn in their badges and be held accountable for their inaction.
Greater than these cowardly pieces of poo should turn in their badges and be held accountable for their inaction. I bet they won't. And I bet whatever does happen to them will be anemic at best.
I am a state trooper, and a federally certified active shooter instructor. I also teach counter-ambush, officer survival tactics, tactical trauma med, vehicle assault tactics, and a few other things. We have a few specific things we hammer constantly during our week-long training. Stop the killing, start the saving. We do not stop until the killing has stopped, whether that is the shooter is dead by their hand or ours, surrendered and in custody, or has in some other way eluded capture and we cannot locate them, but they are not actively killing anyone. Then we can start the saving by assisting injured, relocating people, etc. LICET, locate, isolate, contain or eliminate, and transition. Again, it focuses on the shooter until that's resolved, then transition to either a barricade or hostage rescue, or transition to medical assistance. We also talk about how our job is to take the bullets so others don't have to. We have means to deal with a threat and body armor to give us a better chance of survival, others do not. Our literal job that I expect is for us to stand in front of the gunfire. We tell them that this is indeed a big ask, but if you cannot do this, then this job is not for you. We talk about how the tactics we teach are not the safest, and that's the inherent risk for quickly moving as a solo officer in response to an active shooter, but that it must be done. I am waiting for official reports, but if it is along the lines of what is being reported, I am appalled. Absolutely appalled, because it is a direct contradiction to everything that has been taught in the last decade plus. Edit *. Well, I got back to this 14 hours later and it exploded. Many of the questions are about whether official reports will be reliable, and why am I waiting to see what it says before jumping to conclusions? Here's my answer. Yes, I trust the official reports. Having been in circumstances where the news and conjecture about an incident I was part of were absolutely wrong, I know that there is more going on, and these are highly complex events. Texas DPS or some other entity will investigate this, and they, like I, will want to know why. If they did not act, then that's what we would want to know. Were there mag-lock doors so they couldn't access or something else? Some doors can be absolutely near impossible to breach because they are designed for that purpose. Could they have used an alternate entrance? What about a window? Does this school have reinforced windows which can't just be shattered? There are many questions, which I want to learn about, before I make a decision. There is so much evidence and things to learn before they can make a statement that the conjecture runs wild. I truly hope they did everything they could. I know if I was in a situation where I could not access the area and could hear it happening, it would be the worst feeling imaginable, the completely hopeless feeling, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. With that said, if they truly could have acted and didn't, it's an absolute disgrace. I will, again, wait for more information to be presented.
I literally never comment on anything but felt like I should hear. I've only been on the job for a year and change in the largest department in America, and while we're definitely not perfect, I've been to a few shootings personally, and even with shots ringing out within visual range, I've never seen any one of my coworkers run away or just wait for ESU cause they could get shot, and I know I've never ran away. While I can understand being afraid, I can't understand not doing your job. We're first responders, and as such it's our job to go in there and get it done. Backup be damned. I hate Monday night quarterbacking, but I've risked my life on this job for way less, so when other officers wait idle while kids get gunned down, it makes me mad.
Greater than it makes me mad. It should. Those cops just made your job 1000% more dangerous. Cops across the nation have lost public support and respect from law-abiding citizens. You should expect to see a lot more vigilante crime, and anti-cop aggression.
Oh, trust me, I know that very well. It's why I'm here right now. The last thing this city needs is more people shooting each other. I know there's no way for you to verify this, but for what it's worth, you have my word. If and when reform comes at a nationwide level, it will have my support if it means curbing senseless killings.
Ashamed of this agency and their so-called chief. If the shooter is isolated, you wait because time is on your side to negotiate. If they are actively shooting people, action must be taken. Just because the SCOTUS says there's no duty to intervene, I think most law agencies' policy and, obviously, public opinion beg to differ.
We should all be ashamed of the SCOTUS that would rule that police have no duty to intervene or to protect the public.
Agreed. What else is the point? Kind of disgusted by all of the attempts at covering up what those officers did as well.
The only reason the truth is being aired now is that A, there are videos and testimonies that directly contradict the cops' statements, and B, the FBI is now involved, and if you lie to them, no type exemption will protect you.
In Britain, there was an attacker with a machete on London Bridge, and our unarmed police officers ran towards him with only pepper spray and batons, literally, hitty sticks. In fact, one was an off-duty transport police officer with no gear at all. I can't fathom the slowness of the response in Texas.
Narwhal Tusk Guy. Link.
Disgusted. My department had an all-cops run-in strategy ready to go. We even had an airport stairs on a pickup truck to drive to the side of the school if it was a hostage situation on the second floor. We coordinated with firefighters to have multiple cops on the platform on top of the ladder on the fire trucks, and the fire trucks would drive us up to the sides of the school and the cops would make entry through the windows. We practiced breaking down the doors, and also practiced breaking through the drywall and studs if the door was barricaded. We were told any cop who didn't go into a school shooting situation unless told by the chief otherwise would be fired. We were also told that if we kneeled on any suspect we would be fired, and the chief would recommend to the DA to charge us, and would give the evidence themselves. This was also well before BLM. When I see putty cops clowning around, I am pissed. That's why cops all over have bad names. It's because of clowns like these.
Sounds like you had a good boss. Glad to hear it.
Federal law enforcement here. I took a one-day active shooter training last year. The theme they kept hammering into us was, stop the killing, so you can stop the dying. Meaning, you need to find the shooter as fast as possible to kill or incapacitate him. Nothing else matters before then. They had role players with like fake blood, injury kits on screaming for help, and we just stepped around, over them in our way towards the sound of gunfire. Once the shooter is dead, then you sprint back and start evacuating and treating people. Also, you go in alone or grab a couple other responders on your way in. You don't methodically clear rooms, you don't secure stuff, and you certainly don't try to do crowd control. I see a lot of people on Reddit say, standard police procedure is, fill in the blank, and they are usually wrong. However, almost everyone is exactly right on what I've seen about active shooter training. And it's been that way since effing Columbine. There is no excuse for police leadership in Uvalde to not know this. Typically I try to not judge people in these scenarios because there's so many different factors and challenges that affect your decision making. However, in this case, and in Parkland, F these guys. They should be fired and never work in law enforcement again. A lot of people, some police included, sometimes think that valor is like an everyday thing. It's definitely not, that's why we hand out medals for it. But to see officers just stand outside that classroom as children were shot and bleeding to death is awful and unforgivable.
My dad taught active shooter classes for years before he was retired, and I helped out with the exact training scenarios you are talking about. In one, I even role-played the shooter when I was about 14 years old. We had kids crying out for help in the hallways as I was shooting blanks down the hallway of my high school. It was an insane experience to go through, but we knew what we were doing could potentially save lives if the unthinkable were to happen. Looking at this response by police who in theory had this training just a few months ago, I'm not so sure. It's one thing to play out a scenario and say all the right answers in the training, and another thing entirely to put your life on the line to save children. The argument that the Blue Lives Matter folks have had the whole time in regards to defending the police is that the cops are heroes who need resources to save us in the face of tragedy. When I see a video of nearly 20 cops standing outside a slaughterhouse detaining screaming parents armed with rifles, what exactly is it that we are paying for? This incident has me rethinking a lot of things in regards to how we as a country should be viewing and funding our law enforcement. This will get buried, I'm sure, but I'm retired, and now work as an instructor for various police departments. I'll say that all police departments and the training that they receive just aren't created equally. I deal with departments mainly on the East Coast, but it's crazy to me to see the way geographical locations change responses. For example, Maryland and DC departments seem pretty competent. Their active shooter response tactics are current and progressive and very effective. Same with Northern Virginia. 1 hour away in West Virginia or Southern VA, and NC couldn't be more different. Using dated tactics, lack of tactics, things that will get people and themselves hurt and killed are still being taught at an academy level. It's just highlighted to me that there needs to be some sort of national standards set for some of these specific responses. It's goddamn scary to me that in some parts of the county your police are being trained by generational F-ups who are politically connected and only have their positions because of their daddy's daddy. They haven't learned anything new since the early 80s and refuse to adapt to new times and techniques. These people need to be ashamed of themselves and held accountable at the highest level for allowing these kinds of things to continue. In regards to specifically what happened in Texas, the advantage those cops had to stop that massacre was training, tactics, and overwhelming force. And they chose to use none of that. Heartbreaking. Edit update. Sorry, I want to respond to everyone, but I decided to add some updates to answer a few questions. Police National Standards. The federal government has a police training center called FLETC. All federal law enforcement agencies go to police training there. Now there are a lot of agencies that do their own training, but they all still have to have basic training at FLETC. So let's say I work for the FBI. I know that no matter what, if I'm working alongside special agents from the ATF, DIA, DOS, etc., that no matter what their individual agencies' training and missions are, that at the absolute very least we all have the exact same training from the CITP course at FLETC. So we've all learned the same minimum standards at some point. That's all I'm saying for perspective. Dated tactics. Some dated tactics include waiting for the SWAT team to respond to active shooters, waiting for a negotiator, waiting for a supervisor to tell you what to do. I actually do teach a lot of tactics that involve slowing down. But that applies to making better and informed decisions with a clear head instead of just rushing in with adrenaline to use force. This does not apply to active shooter training. Active shooters. The standard is to make entry, bypass the wounded, engage the threat as fast as possible. It's that simple.
How would you feel about police having to renew a license every 2 years like nurses do? Like nurses, they would have to show proof of training and continuing education. Their license would be put to a licensing board for review and then be renewed. Works for nurses, doctors, anesthesiologists, barbers, massage therapists.
I was a police officer back in the early O for a little over 7 years, and my dad is a retired, lifelong military and civilian police officer. We were talking about this situation earlier today, and we both agreed that rushing into that situation may have been our last actions as living humans, but we'd have done it. My dad said, better to die trying than to live being branded a coward and thinking what if. That whole protect part of protect and serve is an absolute in a situation where 7 and 8-year-old kids are being shot and them hanging around outside is unforgivable. I firmly believe that every officer that busied themselves tazzing parents should, at a minimum, be fired and nationally blacklisted from ever being in law enforcement for life. Same for their chief. Edit 1. I used the whole protect and serve motto as an example of what they should be doing. Edit 2. I know there's not a blacklist for bad cops, but I wish there was.
They TAZED parents.
It's like Parkland, Florida all over again. Someone with a badge and gun heard shots and did absolutely nothing. Cowards.
This is even worse though. Parkland was one coward. This was an entire group of cowards who sat around doing F all while kids were being actively murdered and bleeding out on the other side of the wall.
This department has now created a situation where parents will show up to a future incident armed and not likely to take direction from officers on the scene.
Cue next year's story where a parent gets shot by the police in a mix-up.
Disgusted. Angry. I was a cop from 2012 to 2019 and did multiple active shooter training at schools. Responded to a mass shooting at a block party and we ran in. We knew the risk when we signed up for the job. This was a nightmare scenario that they effed up so badly.
Pretty effing angry. I am retired now, but taught active shooter response for over 10 years. Uvalde ISD chief should resign and turn in his credentials and get a job digging ditches. Thank goodness Bortak took the initiative, even if they waited and listened to Rwando for 30 minutes.
Instead, the chief is running for city council. Can't even make this poo up.
Actual law enforcement here. It's disgusting, and I'm embarrassed. Training aside, and hearing about what you should do by keyboard commandos. In this case, you're absolutely right. I've been present at active shooter situations, like the real ones. It's not a time to wait for orders or a scene commander. It's a time where you tell whoever is on the other end of the radio, hold the channel for emergencies. I only want to know when someone else is coming inside and from where. And you know what, it effing sucks. My back hurt for 3 weeks afterwards, pushing through barricaded doors and feeling like I was walking into an ambush. It wasn't fun, but it's not supposed to be. It's your effing job. From what I'm reading, seeing, it sounds like just general cowardice and lack of training. The only people who did the right thing were the HSI and Border Patrol agents who just heard it coming out and went in even though it wasn't their responsibility. Something that stuck with me throughout my tenure in the Army. When the time comes for you to rise up and save the day, you're not going to be a hero, you're going to default to your lowest level of training. Pooh, small town, departments are terrifying, and generally employ bottom-of-the-barrel people, in my limited, and probably pretentious, opinion. YMMV.
What makes it even worse is that they have received training and the training specifically says you may have to go in alone and to not wait as mass shootings can get worse very fast. Link.
I'm a former police officer. I'm sickened by it, especially since this is exactly the opposite response to an active shooter scenario than what the training dictates. In Europe at least, when you arrive at the scene of a suspected active shooter, you are taught to ignore the usual SOP in case of, for instance, a hostage situation or barricaded suspect. In those cases, you set up a perimeters and call in the SWAT team, who are equipped and trained to deal with that stuff. But in an active shooter scenario, you grab whatever gear you have in the trunk, and you go in, making as much noise as you can along the way. You shout, "Stop! Police!" at the top of your lungs and you push as fast as possible to the source of the shots. You don't stop to render aid to the wounded people you meet along the way, stepping over screaming victims if you have to. The reason for this approach is 1, to intervene and stop the killing as fast as possible, but also 2, that most active shooters turn the gun on themselves when they know law enforcement is closing in. You keep moving, shouting and shooting, anything to stop the situation, either by neutralizing the gunman yourself, or better yet, have him end it himself. It's a risky and horrible part of the job, one that I was happy to never have had to experience in reality. But if you roll up to a situation like that and you're too scared to do what you're paid and entrusted to do, then hand in your badge and go flip effing burgers.
Kindergarten teacher here. During our active shooter training at the beginning of each school year, this is exactly what we're told police will do during an active shooter situation. Thank you for your explanation, because reading what really happened in Texas made me feel like these trainings were a bunch of BS, but I guess that's just their police force.
Seething. I was already pretty pissed when I found out about it, but finding out the cops went in to save their kids and proceeded to let the shooter run around for an hour because they, quote, were scared they'd get shot, has ticked me the F off. I hope every single of them is fired, but knowing Texas they won't get their just desserts. Edit. Thanks for the upvotes, but I don't deserve them lol. I'm not a police officer, I'm just a dumbass who didn't see the part where Op was asking for police officers' opinions on this situation.
Not a cop. Then, after they saved their kids, they didn't let others in to do the same.
Sue, my uncle is a policeman, and he said that the second they heard a shoot from the inside they were obligated to go in. Edit. So, obligation doesn't instantly mean they were by law required to do so. More of a moral obligation. Sorry for that confusion. I'm Australian and have friends in the various state forces, some of them in tactical units. They couldn't believe how any of this was handled, nor did they believe any of those officers would ever survive the intake process for SOG, let alone even making it through the 12-month academy training program to start with. U.S. policing in general suffers from fragmentation in funding, training, and discipline. There doesn't need to be 8 layers of policing and 50 different county departments all doing the same role but without a shared vision. There is a lot of talk about defunding the police. I say bullpoo. It should be about amalgamation of police. State police bodies with a single training program, single operating standards, single funding, etc.
Thank you for watching. We upload new videos every day, so be sure to come back for more fun. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video.